Welcome back to another episode of Comes the Time. That's Oteil.
And that's Mike. And we are happy to have you back. We had a good one. Mr. Robert Walter from the Gray Boy All-Stars. And also, he's out with
Roger Waters. Living his childhood dream, one of his childhood dreams. Musicians have more than one dream, I feel, as a child.
Well, that was the seminal one for him.
Yeah.
Did he say that was the first album?
First
that
album
he bought with his own money?
Yeah.
Was The Wall?
Yeah.
And
pretty amazing. Now he's on stage with them. So see, kids, it happens.
That's right. It sure
if you
does.
do it right. Yeah, that was an awesome chat. And it's so cool as, you know, like the path to now went through punk and went through funk and went through all types of fun buses with holes in it and all types of great things. So this is a really cool chat, man.
Bus,
really
that
cool.
Was a van. And
he
he's
said
touring
a little
the
school
Midwest
bus.
in the winter time. Oh, that's right. That's right.
A little,
oh my
little
God.
Small bus. Hey, congrats on your 100K shirt. What's going on there?
DDP yoga. I hit 100,000 points.
You got your shirt.
Then you get I thought I was going to get my water bottle, but it's a shirt. I'm psyched though.
Now, remind me, I think when we were having carbs for breakfast, you told me you ordered that shirt as a medium.
I ordered it as a medium.
It's a fit.
And, I think I did pretty good.
Nice.
Pretty
Yeah.
Good. Wait a minute.
Absolutely.
This is the real test right here.
The side test. Yeah, it looks good, man. That's
so
awesome.
now I got to stay in it, right? I could just keep putting the shirt on to see like if I'm getting off the rails here.
You don't want it ending up in the someday bin.
Yeah, but I also got a new passion. Got into trading cards. A friend of mine in the neighborhood takes his son to these card shows. Yeah. And they were doing like baseball. Like Nigel just wants all Pokemon.
Yeah.
So his son wasn't into it at first. He was like, Pokemon's lame. But then he got into it. So then we went with them. And Nigel, dude, it's the cutest thing. Talk about subculture.
Oh,
it's a whole
card shows
different
are
vibe.
A real deal.
So yeah, I got some old Rey Mysterio. I got a rookie Rey Mysterio.
A rookie.
And I have a Dusty Rhodes. Where's Dusty? The American Dream. Yeah, I was like.
Did they ever make musician playing cards? Was that ever a thing?
I think they have some. Mick Foley.
There you go.
Bret Hart, Booker T. Come on, where's Dusty? Taker. He's just in dark. He's blacked out. I love it. He's like a ghost.
Oh, is that like a hologram type card? That background looked cool.
Where's Dusty Rhodes? Where's the American Dream? There he is.
Yeah, how about that? Nice.
Yeah, so we're going into the subcultures.
Dueling childhoods. I love it. That's fantastic. Tandem, not dueling, tandem. It's a fun thing, not a fight. Yeah.
That's right. But Nigel is like, dude, he's off the chain. It's so great to watch him like freak out, like get that excited, you know.
Those are fun, man. Those are really fun. Yeah. Those card shows are, the people that run those tables are a trip.
It's a trip, man. And then some young kids started coming up to work at me. Like, I don't know the whole thing now, but I'm starting to see what's going on. There's angles. But yeah, Amazing. It's cool, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Robert, for joining us, and congrats on the tour with Roger Waters. And and go check out the Gray Boy All-Stars are going to be hitting the road soon as well. So enjoy this episode. Thank you guys, as always, for joining us. We're here on Osiris, home to so many great podcasts. Check them out at osirispod.com. And if you like what you're hearing, you could join us over at patreon.com/comesatimepod for a bonus episode and chats every week. So thank you guys. Oteil, congrats on 100K. And we'll check you guys out soon. Peace.
So you're on the road right now?
I'm on the road with Roger Waters, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's like sort of kid rock star dream.
Now, how did all that come about?
I knew a couple guys from the band, just from sessions in LA and stuff. And they needed an organ player. I think before me, it was Bo from My Morning Jacket, but they're on tour, so you can't do it. So they called me up. I kind of joked with my girlfriend when I got the call from Gus, one of the players. I was like, oh, it'd be funny if he was calling me about that, but it ended up being it. So it's cool.
Wow. So how far into the tour are you currently?
We played about 20 gigs. And then there was like a month of rehearsals before that. So I've been out for a couple months. It's also a longer tour than I'm used to. Usually, like with Grey Boy All Stars, we go out for 3 weeks or something. So this one lasts, 4.5 months altogether. But,
whoa.
Yeah.
That is long.
Most bands would kill each other.
Of a year.
Before.
Like I said, there's only like 2 or 3 gigs a week. So it's a pretty mellow schedule.
Nice.
Now, have you been having to deal with COVID stuff, all that?
There's a lot of restrictions on this. Like, we're not really supposed to. If your friends come, if they want to hang out with you, they have to test into the bubble and sort of stay in another room, and they can only be behind the soundboard. They can't even be in the. I can't say hi to friends, but I can get people tickets, and I gotta wave to them when I'm walking fast. But
yeah, we went through that, man. Jeez.
Yeah. That's kind of something that we've talked about quite a bit on the podcast, is dealing with that isolation. How have you been dealing with it?
I kind of enjoy being by myself anyway, to be honest, especially on the road after all those years of being in a van, real tight quarters, and you're never alone, you're sharing hotel rooms and stuff. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And during lockdown, I got kind of used to doing my own thing. So I have a keyboard I set up, and I just work on music and stuff like that.
So you have a keyboard in the hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's
just just like a cheap MIDI thing, but it allows me to work.
It's a friend. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like the limitation in a way of not having all your gear, like a million things to distract you. Because with you're getting this one synthesizer and kind of go down a tube and never work on any actual music, and having one thing and just, this is what I'm working on, kind of, streamlines the process, I guess.
It's good. You've made a healthy choice. Mm-hmm. It has been good for some people that I know. And they were like, some people I know were a little, I don't want to say extreme, but they're like, I kind of wished I could have done this anyway. So now I'm like finally getting my chance. Like, sorry, everyone.
I managed to practice a lot during that whole time on things that, instead of working on like songs for the next gig, I could get into fun stuff. Like, I always wanted to learn how to do this, or like work on boogie woogie piano, or like just little sort of projects that they don't have any obvious, work payoff. It's more just stuff I attack your weaknesses, I guess,
Yeah, but I think it does bleed in, because like even when I think of styles of music that I wasn't into before that I am now, and somehow it like finds its way in like somewhere. So it's just good. It's good to have personal growth stuff that's just for you. I think it's all going to come out at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, is that there's that sort of hamster wheel of constantly, next gig, what are you working on? And this kind of was free form. It reminded me of being a kid again. When you first started getting into music, what did you like? And just because you dig it, like, it's cool.
That's awesome. What's it like working with Roger Waters? Is this a big, like you said, childhood dream? Did you grow up a big fan? And
I was a huge fan as a kid. The Wall was one of the first records I went out and bought with my own money, and I still have my copy, and it plays pretty good.
Wow.
So I was actually learning the tunes off that when I dropped the
that's
needle. I was like, whoa, and it kind of still smells like you're a kid. It's got that. I love old records. So,
did you get him to sign it?
No.
Dude, come on, man.
I don't know how he would react.
A couple months left.
Not a bad idea. I got to tell him this story one time, but so it was a big thing for me. Like when I was a kid, and I imagined what it would be like to be in a rock band. That's one of the bands I thought about, along with like Led Zeppelin and The Who and things like that. So, so it's really cool to, sort of be doing that and be part of a big production. There's a lot of visual elements to the show, and I'm not used to quite that much of that. And you know, he's a tough boss. Like, he's definitely in charge and knows what he wants. It's cool. The music feels real vital for being a sort of a legacy act like that. Sometimes you think of these things as like, you go out and play the hits, and he's constantly changing things and introducing new stuff. And so it's pretty fun.
I think you got to get him to sign that thing, bro.
Yeah. Also, those organ parts are so fun to play. It's like, kind of when you're first like the Hammond organ when you're a kid, that's the stuff. It's like, you know, hold the thing and turn it away. You know, it's like all that it's a glory gig for the organ parts, you know.
That's got to be fun. You're like, I'm that guy now.
Yeah. Yeah, the parts are simple, but they're very, like, you know, big. So
huge. Yeah, giant parts of that music for sure. When did you start playing? Like, let's go back if we could a bit. Like, when did you first when did your playing begin?
Origin story.
Yeah, I think I was like 7 or 8 when I started playing piano. I took lessons like everybody else, sort of Suzuki method, classical, you know, using Mozart pieces and stuff. And I liked it okay, but I was like all kids where I'd rather go, you know, hang out with my friends and play video games or whatever. But then I sort of quit playing piano, and I discovered rock music and played drums in some bands. And that's when I really started like having a garage band and got into all that classic rock. I mean, we were playing, you know, Van Halen and Ozzy covers and Led Zeppelin tunes and stuff like that. It was cool. And then I started getting interested I wanted to write music, and that led me back to the piano. We always had a piano in the house, and I'd like, you know, make up chords and stuff, because writing from the drums is kind of hard. It's hard to explain what you want to the band. And then sort of through a bunch of different things, I was playing both instruments in some bands and keyboards in one band and drums in another. And then I just started playing drums less and less and got more into keyboards. So
nice. Natural evolution.
It's also easier to carry a keyboard around, right?
Yeah, there's a
path
little
of
less
least resistance, you know.
I went from, you know, drums to Hammond organ though, so I should have picked something much lighter.
The drum set of keys.
Mm-hmm. I've always had an instrument where you want someone to help, which is, you know, tricky.
Yeah, my brother played flute, and then all of a sudden I was carrying around a Yamaha CP70. Yeah, that era. That's what happened in my back. And Ampeg SVTs.
That's a heavy thing. I've been thinking more and more about the CP70. Actually, that's a great one. I just played one at that store the other day. I kind of want to get one next.
It's actually got kind of a sound now in retrospect.
Yeah, it was sort of like the dreaded thing, like not quite a piano. And now it's kind of like, whoa, you know, reminds me of a certain era of records and stuff, you know. When I first saw Peter Gabriel play, that's what he had in his rig, and it was cool.
Yes. And that was why we wanted it. We were like all the cats were playing it because it was new then. Yeah. This is for people that don't know. A Yamaha CP70 was the answer to not carrying around a grand piano, because the tuning and like for it to move, it's just a big thing. And the CP70 is like an electric version of that, but it really didn't. It has its own sound, to be sure.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a piano exactly, but
it doesn't really sound like a. But
it's also not all that portable. Like, you know, they're like, oh, it's awesome, you can bring it around, and it's like not really portable.
It's 2 parts, but really heavy parts, like really, really heavy. Yeah, that era was great. Oh.
So what's your current rig like on stage now with this band? Like, what are you playing?
With the Roger band, it's a B3 and a ARP Selena, like an old string ensemble. And it's cool that they're
old school.
Yeah, that they're using the vintage one, because it's not that hard of an instrument to fake digitally, but there's something about having the thing, it makes you play it different. Yeah. You run out of keys for one thing, and you and all the sort of imperfections of, like, you know, there's a decay knob and all that, and they're all kind of glitchy in the way that sounds just like those records. You know, it makes you really play that way. And then I'm playing some clavinet parts that are MIDI off of. I'm using a Prophet 6 as a controller for stuff. And that's all. There's another keyboard player who plays like most of the synth parts and electric piano and stuff.
2 keyboard. Yeah, I guess you have to with all the stuff they layered in the studio.
Yeah, it's so orchestrated.
There's a lot of parts.
Yeah. How many pieces is his band right now?
I think there's 10 of us.
That many.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it's cool. And we, there is a idea that we kind of cover a lot of the parts. That means we're iconic and very sonic. Like I love hearing all those sounds come in and out and stuff.
Waves bumping up against each other, making that beautiful chorusing.
Well, the Pink Floyd thing is very similar to the Grateful Dead thing in a way where there are so many extremely talented groups doing their versions or their variants of it. Like there's the Australian Pink Floyd that tours and they're amazing. Sure. Like people go see them, like people follow them. Like it's really amazing how, and there's a whole bunch.
There's a fan base that's really obsessive too, and like knows all the details and checks out all the bootlegs, and people learn different versions. It's kind of got some of that in it.
Yeah, I'm sure that the fans go nuts. Like it must be a thrill being you're looking at the fans going, yeah, I know, this is awesome, Roger Waters.
There is a thing like where people cried during "Wish You Were Here" or whatever. It's got that real emotional thing, and hearing that voice, sing some of those songs like in the flesh or something where it's like he always had that like mean biting kind of thing. Roger, it's great.
We recently had a friend of mine who's a comedian who did a stand-up show with Roger Waters and Roger Waters and who else was there?
That's right. It was it's for Julian Assange.
For Julian Assange, and Roger Waters was there, and he was able to. It was pretty wild to hear him. Like he was able to meet him, and it was to raise awareness and stuff like that. And I know Roger Waters doesn't shy away from. It's pretty the visuals is. He goes in hard. He goes in hard.
Yeah, it's real. It's real political and real confrontational. It's very like It's it's kind of amazing for somebody his age and also with his sort of like rock star legacy to still be like digging in. Like it feels like I grew up in punk rock bands and stuff, and it kind of feels like that, but on this big level, like in an arena. But it's got that sort of like I don't know. It kind of grabs you by the throat in a way I find aesthetically exciting. It's real visceral.
He's the 70, 80-year-old version of Rage Against the Machine. Just still in his wheelchair. Fuck you!
Cool. It's a trip
into the grave.
It reminds me of the Clash or something like that too. That kind of thing. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So, what about your new record now?
So Grey Boy All Stars is just we're releasing our second album on vinyl for the first time. It came out in like the mid '90s, right at the time when we thought people weren't going to make records anymore. So it was on a CD. It's also real long, that time when everybody was making these like 60 and 70-minute records because you're like, oh my God, we got all this time. Amazing. I kind of over time have learned most of the time they played over long, but this one really worked. And it's one of my two favorite records in the catalog.
Cool.
It's been out of print for a long time. It was like our first time where it felt like a real band. The first album we made, we had done like a few months after we started, and made it in a day. And this one we kind of had some time and we had grown into the music a lot more. So it's cool. We recorded at a Wally Hyder in San Francisco, which is, where they had made those Herbie records I love and all that, Tower Power. So, so we felt like we were part of this, history. And anyway, so it's coming out on vinyl. It sounds great. It's remastered up from the tapes, and I'm proud of the record.
Sweet. I'm trying to start a vinyl thing now. I recently just had a weekend of just vinyl listening, and I was like, oh wow, it really hooked me. With the kids, I'm scared.
Right.
Because they're 4 and 7. And they just broke the Undertaker, by the way.
They did?
Yeah.
No.
I took it out for the girls to play with. I was like, they are dolls. They're not dolls. They broke it. But, but yeah, I'd still want to do it because it sounds different. Like the airwaves in the house sound and feel different. And I grew up with that. And I realized my kids aren't growing up with that. They're growing up with like Alexa. That's wrong.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of things about it that I love. Like, I love that you have to commit to the side at least. So nowadays we're just like, oh, that wasn't that good. Let's just skip it, or
shuffle,
whatever, looking around, and everything's available. So you don't have that feeling like it used to be like your few records you had, that was it. Like if you wanted to hear something, or whatever was on the radio, but you didn't get to choose it. So, if you had 3 records, you play the shit out of those records and listen to every part. I used to, put on a record by Rush and listen to it, turn it over again. Like I'd go 4 and 5 times in headphones, just like, whoa, and it's just a different experience. It's more, there's a deeper, commitment to the thing. And you look at the cover and sit there. It was less passive. It's kind of like we're immersed in the music,
Yeah. Poor Kavi doesn't I swear, man, she doesn't let a whole song finish. So she'll go in and she'll be like, no, Alexa, change it. So we've listened to like 30 seconds of 10 songs. Yeah. And I'm like, this is not good. Like the attention span, and gets really mad at the radio. We take the Jeep sometimes, which is, like, you might as well cranked it up. It's from the 1800s. And she can't conceive that she can't tell the radio. Like, so I'm like, this is bad, man.
Yeah, that's the downside of all that stuff being so readily available. It's great because if you want to check something out, you can do it. But also there's this whole thing of when you used to buy a record, you couldn't make sure you liked it before you got it.
That's right.
So once you took it home, you tried to like it. You know what I mean?
That's why everybody got so pissed at Miles, because all you could do was go, well, I like that person.
Yeah.
So I'm trusting, I could get that much. I'm like 75% of the way there. But then with Miles, it was like, well, it's Miles, but what the hell is he going to do this time? We just immediately piss off
half.
half.
Shows up and you're like, whoa, that's not what I thought I was getting. Yeah.
And then you go,
so
all right.
You have something invested in it. You have money invested in it. So you took that thing home. So you're going to give it a chance at least,
Yeah. How did you find, do you have siblings, older or younger, or did you find the music yourself or through your parents? Like what was your...
So I'm an only child, but my dad was a drummer in bands and my parents were Deadheads. So they had interest in music and cool record collection. So, Grateful Dead, Allman Brothers, Little Feat, was a big thing in our house. And then my dad had he had a couple of jazz things. He had a Ramsey Lewis trio record. He had Herbie Hancock Headhunters. Nice. He had a Meters compilation, like a best of Meters that I haven't seen that much, but it had all the old Josie stuff. Rejuvenation.
Sounds like the house I'd like to grow up in.
No kid. I'm like
Little Feet and the Meters. That's it right there, man.
Yeah. So it kind of got me hooked on that, and and from those things, it led me to everything else. I knew about the Meters, and then references to Professor Longhair. So then I got into that when I started playing piano seriously, and Dr. John, of course, and then it just leads you down a rabbit hole. You get into one jazz record, you look at the sidemen, and then you realize they all have records, and then you go on and on. It's a whole universe.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's true.
You're at Ahmad Jamal.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about the. I was sort of a geek in that way. You get a Blue Note record, whatever, Wayne Shorter, and then it's Herbie and Ron Carter, and then you go, who else do they play with? And it's the whole, it goes on forever, really.
You still do that too. I remember I was in Denver. We were both playing. I guess we were playing with Eddie Roberts on something.
Yeah, it was one of those benefits, I think.
Yeah, I was tired. I'm like old and time going to bed. You guys stayed up late, like just talking about records and listening to stuff. Yeah, it was great. I was like, this is so cool. I mean, we used to do that as teenagers, like that you still had it. It was like right there. That's cool.
I did a trio with Deitch and Eddie. And on the road, it was so fun because instead, as you get older, everyone kind of goes off with their own little crew, and that band, every time, instead of like going out to party and talk to people, we just end up geeking out about music for hours. It's super fun.
That's something like I really don't like riding in vans and rental cars. And it was like, I want to be in a tour bus, be able to lay down. But when I do it, we end up like hanging more. Like you say, when everybody's on a bus, everybody goes off to their separate hotel rooms. Most people are on separate buses. Like there's really not seeing each other,
Yeah.
But this is like you end up DJing and talking about something. I'm like, wow, this is really fun,
Yeah, in a way, the more successful you get, the more remote all the band members get. Because when you're in the van, you can't wait to get away from those people. You're like, as soon as the band stops, everyone's, but
just runs in different directions.
But there is something you lose. Even on the bus, you don't listen to music together as much as when you're stuck in the van because there's only one radio or whatever. Especially before everyone had phones and headphones and stuff. It was a little more you committed to stuff and you trade off. I learned about a lot of music from that because my friends would bring it. I always make mixtapes of vinyl, like up rare sort of funk and jazz records, just to sort of turn the band onto things. And then we had one guy that was really into Fish and the Dead, and he'd play when it was his turn, he'd play that. And then my other friend had gotten all these Miles Davis bootlegs from the 70s from a European tour, and it was like every night of this trip, and the band was like Gary Bartz and Keith and Michael Henderson, I think.
He just passed.
And they played the same set list every night, but the gigs were so radically different. And so we just listened to this the following night. I remember one tour where we did that. It was real inspiring.
Oh, wow, that's super cool.
Yeah. No like different songs. It was just the way they played the songs was so open that it was, a completely different experience.
I'm trying to do that now with our band. Like, if we do, like, I quote, Get Up, Stand Up in Estimated Profit. Mm-hmm. But now I'm just going to play Get Up, Stand Up all the way through like just remix everything or just like it should be, everything's fair game. We could play it in 5 different keys. It just creates this like threat element, like we're 100% sure that we're not sure what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And then it's like anything could happen now, So you can have the same set list. Doesn't matter.
Really.
Yeah. I've got a couple things I do that are really totally free. And I love playing like that because in a way, when the thing's really rehearsed, there's a thing. And when it's not rehearsed at all, there's a thing. And when there's a thing where it's like halfway, that's when you set yourself up for failure. You know what I mean? Because there's like, oh, well, do whatever you want, but then at this one part, you got to nail this thing. I kind of like creating that atmosphere that there's no anything could happen, like totally open, and then you're responding to things rather than sort of forcing your intention. That's you always end up in a bad way if you're like, I know that we're going to improvise, but I'm going to make it do this. You have to respond to the other people, and the sound of the room matters, and how's your gear acting that night? All those things are, if you play to that, like even certain tempos, the tempo's not right for that room because you're going to hear the back wall. So if you kind of play to the atmosphere, it's cool.
I like to feel the room before I make the set list, which is very difficult sometimes. Impossible sometimes.
Yeah, really, I bet.
Especially
with travel now. Yeah.
At festival, whatever. But like it was nice when we had a band that played so many nights together that we didn't really need a set list even. Mm-hmm. So we could walk into the room and you just know it should start slow tonight, or it should just come out super hard out of the gate tonight, and we could just do it. Like at one point we would stop, and then you would just kind of know what the next tune was. Back with Colonel Bruce, it would be that way. We never wrote a set list.
Yeah,
that's a bunch of songs that just.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Greyboy All-Stars never wrote a set list in the first few years. And then we started, at some point, there started to be these weird, long, dead air things where we'd kind of be fighting over what's next. Someone would be like,
guys are so fun live.
And then people would be like, no, I hate that one, you know? So we started making a list. But we still go off script often, you know? Because we can feel that it's wrong. Like you're halfway through the thing and you're like, no, that can't be the next one. So then we will correct. But just to get rid of like, well, you know, everybody had like one tune they didn't like to play and they'd veto it every time. It's funny.
It's great to know everybody that well. Like how did you guys come together?
It was originally? Really in a way, an unorganic thing, or inorganic. Is that so? DJ Greyboy had made this record called Freestyling. I don't know if you know who DJ Greyboy is, but he's sort of like, he was a DJ and he was like sort of the guy who was our creative director at the beginning. And he had all these cool old records and he turned us on to, you know, all those old funky Blue Notes and, you know, he had this crazy record collection. So he had made this record called Freestyling that was basically like sampled beats, like breakbeat style music, but with live jazz soloists. Carl Denson was one of the soloists. And when he had a record release party and he said, I don't want to play this record. I want a band to play the tunes live. So we just formed for that. It was supposed to be a one-off thing for his thing. And it was so fun at the first rehearsal, even we were like, this is amazing. You know, we need to do this. And then it just kind of went on. We got a local gig in San Diego at Weekly, and then we loved that, and we started learning more songs. But it originally started just as a one-off thing. And
that's awesome.
And that's all of us were not even really into that kind of music. I mean, we all liked funk and jazz a little bit, but I was playing sort of in these weird sort of punk rock bands, and, you know, Carl was just coming out of Lenny Kravitz, and our guitar player was in kind of a rock band, and we for some reason it just made sense to all of us, you know.
It's great. So, it's like J-Rad.
Yeah, it's the same way it happened. Yeah, the one-off thing that is too good to ignore. You know,
but chemistry is like that, and fate. You know,
totally.
And because we came together around this sort of set of, originally it was just we're just trying to emulate these records that Greyboy had. You know, he was really into crate digging, and at the time, a lot of that funky music was out of print. All those funky Blue Notes were very seen as very déclassé in the jazz world. You know, it was kind of the time of Witten and this sort of, you know, something that went back to sort of acoustic jazz, and all these soul and R&B influences were seen as sort of like commercial in a bad way or whatever. But I heard that stuff and I was like, this is exactly what I want to hear. It's way better. It doesn't feel as cerebral. It doesn't feel as demure. It felt like more visceral and awesome.
More punk.
Yeah. And funky. And also the players, like, this is not to slight someone like Melvin Sparks or Reuben Wilson, but compared to listening to Benson or Jimmy Smith, you heard those records and we were like, I'm never going to play that good. And you heard, you know, Melvin and Reuben and those guys play, and you're like, there's better than me, but I could get that. Like, I could figure that out, you know, if I slow it down.
Approachable.
So it turned everyone on. People say that, like, when the Ramones played in England the first time, it started all of the punk bands in England. You know, the Clash were there, and Susie and the Banshee all these people were in the audience because they were like, I can buy a guitar and learn how to be the Ramones.
3 chords, yeah.
I'm not going to be Yes or Emerson, Lake and Palmer, no matter how hard I try. But
Clapton,
you know, so it's kind of, you know, it makes the music accessible to average people.
I like that because I think the most fun way to teach and to learn music is that way. Like it's the old folk tradition where everybody plays together.
Mm-hmm.
Like
right.
you just, whatever style, when you go back far enough, they just did it that way. It's inclusive.
That's what I love about reggae music too, is that it's like it really isn't super. It's just another interpretation of those chords, and it's just skipping the beats versus the way that it was played in a folk song or something like that, or just drummed differently, and that's what's so cool about it.
I feel like New Orleans music's like that too. It's like, in a way, you can play it at any level. You can have a place in it. Of course, the greatest people are going to be the ones that you remember and you want to go see or whatever. But you could still be in the band without a lot of skills because it's the music's based upon real, valid, simple ideas, and you learn it from your elders and from the people around you and your peers, instead of, it's not like I'm smarter than you contest.
Exactly.
It's more about bringing people in. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to learn what their story is. Mm-hmm. That's why, but there's a lot more crossover than I thought. Like, because I remember when I learned with Colonel Bruce that Pharoah Sanders was in Bobby Blue Bland's band. Mm-hmm. And then I recently saw an interview, I think it was George Coleman. And he was like, he's from Memphis, I think. He said, well, if I were to play with Muddy Waters, I'd play more like this. But, if I'm playing with, Herbie or whatever, like it's, and I was like, wow,
Yeah.
And most great players don't have that.
That snobbery.
Yeah. What Charlie Hunter used to call it the jazz arms race. Like everyone's trying to re-up each other with more reharmonization. Most people recognize that it's just music, and it's context matters, and the connection to American traditions, blues and things. That's the most basic part. That's essential. If you don't have that, it's not really that music. It's not really jazz. Or not that I'm some expert on jazz, but those are the things that are the through line with all the great American. I mean, it happens in all the music.
I mean, you have to go back to New Orleans, really, because that's where the only place blacks were allowed to keep their drums.
Absolutely.
That's what fascinates me about that place. Like, so whether it's blues, gospel, jazz, everything, like
country music's really related in its own way too.
Zydeco
and bluegrass and bluegrass.
Well,
and Charlie Hayden and Gary Burton. And who else? Because we were talking about this with Christian McBride when he was on the podcast. We're really plugged in on that side, the country side, where it all meets up too. And that's why I say it's really just about what your story is. Pat, because there's where Pat Metheny's coming from. And, it's all really, it's great. I'm interested in everybody's human story. That's how I approach music. Where I used to approach it Ornette has the best quote about it. It says, I'm seeking to eliminate the caste system of music. Mm-hmm. It's like the arms race thing. It's like,
yeah. Well, that's what's interesting.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead. I was
just saying there's an interesting thing happening now in sort of like the YouTube tutorial generation of music. And I think it's great that you could go on there and
it is.
How do you do this? But it's become this thing of everybody out chopsing each other. And on the other bad side is people learning stuff wrong because one guy who's the top hit of how do you play this song has the chords a little wrong, and everyone learns from them. And it going sort of back to the roots of it, or learning from people in your band and having that sort of community to bounce off of instead of you in your room just shredding some, it's gotten a little crazy with that.
They just need to use it
more.
They need to balance it out, because I learned to play banjo initially on YouTube. It was great for getting me going, But then, I have all these friends in bluegrass. So
you can literally touch it, like all the best players in the world.
I had to wait till I wasn't embarrassed to I'm always embarrassed, but it quickly morphed to all right, can you show me this? Because I'm doing something wrong. Like I saw it on YouTube this way and it doesn't sound. So I plugged into the human part,
Yeah. I think you're right. Like it is good. And I actually go on there when I'm like, what do you think this is? And sometimes it'll really show me some tricks. So it's totally a good tool. It just doesn't replace the sort of, other people are, other people in person are a great thing.
Yes. Actual reality in addition to virtual reality.
4-dimensional. What I was interested to think, because like Oteil mentioned, like everyone's story leading up to today. I'm interested in your punk. You've brought up punk quite a bit. Like you were playing in it. Like, did you go to lots of shows in the beginning? Like, that's such a niche thing, and but very interesting. I listened to a bunch of it when I was a kid too, and I just wanted to know a little bit about like your background in punk and playing it, going to see it. How did that translate to what you're doing now?
When I was a kid and growing up in Southern California in the 80s, that was really like the music that was. It was one of the most exciting things that was happening, along with rap music, but not in Southern California. That wasn't really going off as much yet. So we listened to records from New York or whatever, but the punk scene was very vital. And there was, in San Diego, we didn't have as many clubs as LA did to house that music. So people would do shows at like the Elks Lodge or the YMCA or whatever, and like rent out the room. There was a promoter, Tim Mays, who would do all these shows that sort of like off. Jackie Robinson YMCA was the big one. And he just rent the room. He was like a kid who just loved the music. So he'd bring down, Circle Jerks or Dead Kennedys or whatever.
Circle Jerks at the Elks
Circle
Lodge.
Jerks are great.
That's great.
And they were all
basement.
ages. They were all ages shows. So you could go to them, like as a kid. And then, I started playing in bands. We also were into bands like, Fishbone, who was up there, because the bass player in my band's cousin was Angelo.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they weren't really a punk band, but they were playing in that scene because they were so weird that they didn't work anywhere else. I love X also from LA, they were a proper punk band, but also had these other sort of Americana influences and old country music and there was, a Chicano edge to it. And it was like all these interesting things that were happening in that music. So it felt very exciting to me. And partly because my parents were kind of hippies, I was like rebelling a little bit.
It was the counterculture to the counterculture.
Yeah. So I was like, your music's so mellow and like, everything's cool, man. And I was like, no, I was pissed off. So,
yeah, right.
So cool. So then I was in a band called Daddy Long Legs. It was sort of a Fishbone wannabe that we played like some punk tunes and some ska and some reggae and some funk. That's where I first got into like P-funk and, sort of, I realized that there's all this, P-funk's another one where there's just all this folklore and you can get into all the side projects and all these characters. And as like a comic book kid, it was like amazing,
Yeah.
So,
well, it's funny. That's when you were talking earlier too about the jazz guys, that's kind of what it reminded me of, because we've had a conversation recently about collectibles and how like when you like get into collectibles, you kind of like are able to like, oh, there's this world and then there's that subgenre and then there's this. And that is kind of the amazing thing that music's done, even just as a fan of it or like a geek of it, is that like, oh, this person was influenced by this band, so you can go deep into that. And then there's that guy in that band who started this thing, and you go way off on that. And that's the neat thing that you're able to kind of, I just listened to the audiobook for Flea from the Peppers, Acid for the Children. And just like his explanation of exactly what you're talking about with that like Southern Cal punk scene.
Yeah.
I started going back and listening to some like X and the Germs and a lot of that weird stuff that I never really, I liked it a little when I was a kid, like Minor Threat and stuff like that. But yeah, music is a collectible too. And it's neat to kind of get into that P-Funk folklore and bootsy and all the other weird lanes. It's fun. It's so fun.
Now, can we get some pictures of you from this band, perhaps, Robert, for our videotape to put in the back?
Was there a mohawk?
My mom probably has some.
Please.
Well, and then later I was in a band. My head was shaved for a while. I had kind of that thing going. I was in a band right after that called Creedle that had a record out on Headhunters Records, and we went on tour. We got to open for X and on the road, and it was my first. That's how I got into being on the road. We had bought like a short school bus from the city auction for cheap, but it had like I think there was a hole in the floor. It was in the Midwest in the winter.
Nice.
Jesus Christ!
And the pay was $5 a day, but I had saved up another $5 a day, and we spent it on pitchers of beer.
Nice.
It was like we slept in the band like in the cold. It was crazy.
Yeah,
like
with the hole, that was fun.
I would be crying, but it was the funnest I ever had. I was like,
how old were you then?
I was 20, I think.
Yeah,
21 maybe.
20, you can sleep in a bus with a hole in it. Not any older.
Sometimes we met people from the scene, and they'd let you crash on their floor. That was totally like,
this is a book I want to read.
It was amazing. So, and that band was cool. It was like a punk rock band, but kind of like had some proggy influences too. So like really like math punk rock or something. A lot of odd time riffs and stuff. It was cool music.
Those records are still around. If you can find pictures of that, bro. So there's probably a picture of you on the record, right?
Yeah, well, there's a cartoon of me on the first one. I'll find something.
Please, man, this would be gold for the podcast.
Yeah, really.
Funny.
What was it like playing? Like, so you're 20 and you're in the Midwest opening for X. Like, what were those crowds like? Like, what rooms were you playing? Like, just small, like, tight clubs and.
It's hard for me to remember. Like, everything looks bigger when you first start.
Sure.
It's funny. Like, I'll go around to these clubs again. I'm like. I used to be like the Fox Theater in Boulder. Like I was like, we've arrived. This thing's huge.
I remember that.
And then now you go and you're like, wow, it's not really that big.
And you were playing drums in this band, correct?
I was playing keyboards in Creedle. It was like samples and like sound effects and noise and weird stuff, and it was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah. All right.
Keys and
I don't remember that many punk bands having keys. Well, I guess Fishbone did.
It was sort of a punk derivative. I wouldn't say it was like we weren't a hardcore band. We were sort of beginning
skateboard
of
music.
Post, but it was that scene definitely. So that's the cool thing too. Is more than originally I liked those bands because of the energy, but when it became sort of so prescripted, like what it was, I liked that it sort of allowed all the bands that couldn't play anywhere else. You could get somewhere on the bill because there'd also be like 10 bands on the bill and everybody play 30 minutes. So you could do your weird thing. Like there was some crazy groups where it was like, a guy on a floor tom and a bass player with effects. And that was the gig. Or, like it was open in that way. And if you sucked, people would just like boo, but you did not get the gig,
Because there were 6 other bands playing that day, so they were like,
it didn't pay anything, so it didn't. There's no stakes really.
I used to go to. There was a skate park that an indoor skateboard park that I used to go to, and there was days where 8-9 bands would come play during the day, and you'd end up leaving with like a bag of tapes, like demo to, like 4 songs, 2 songs on each side, these little, and you made a donation to the band or whatever. And it was crazy. You leave with a stiff neck from headbanging and, all that stuff. But it was cool because it's like you said, a lot of bands, that was their only chance to kind of, play in front of people.
Yeah, it was like Land of the Misfit Toys, and I think it really, it's similar to jam band scene in ways.
Totally.
Yeah. Now it's become the jam thing has become more professional because it's more as it's gotten older. There's like when I first started playing to sort of like the sort of dead kind of crowd with tapers and people would follow the band. Grey Boy sort of like got into that accidentally. when we first started, we were playing at sort of dance club things because acid jazz was all the rage, and we fit into that. But that dance scene is usually pretty fickle stylistically, so it kind of moved on to drum and bass and other things, and we didn't have a place to play. So somehow people had started to tape our gigs, and we ended up in this scene. But when I was first doing that, all the bands that were playing on that scene, I don't know if you feel this way, but they weren't self-aware that they were jam bands. They were just weird bands. The audience was what made it a jam band, not the band.
Yeah.
And now there's a younger generation that's grown up on that. So they're like, we are a jam band. This is what we are. But originally it was just like, one was like a Southern rock band, and one was kind of a funk thing, and one was, like there was all these different
and EDM. Yeah, right. Like the New Deal kind of fell into that weird, like there's all these different, you go to a festival and it's like, wow, okay.
Yeah. It can be a good thing because it's like, for one, you can't help it, but I look at it with MMA. Like we were into MMA way back in the day when it was like the karate guy's going to fight the taekwondo guy, or the jiu-jitsu guy is going to fight the
boxer.
And now you have, since like Rory McDonald and all that people, where they started doing everything.
Yeah.
And that's kind of good because they're like, it's all gumbo. It's all jazz. It's all hybrid. Like you're open to everything. Yeah. Even if you like as a kid you did taekwondo, but it's something to start there, because it's open.
And also I think too. Go ahead. Well, no, just as to say to your point, Oteil, like where MMA kind of is the festival of, it's the venue where like, so if you're a fan of, let's say, the Dead and Fish, and you go to a festival and then you go hear, The Word or Robert Randolph or, some different you're like, oh shit, like this is something totally different. You know what I mean? Or you're able to, and there were even hip hop bands that fell into the jam lane.
Absolutely.
Sort of, like J5
early enough
and stuff.
Before you had a bin in the record store, a label. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Colonel Bruce was. I still don't know what it is.
Yeah, what's that genre?
But they let us play on the hippie festival, and I was like, okay,
what is Colonel?
Get it enough to.
If you went to a record store and looked up a Colonel Bruce album right now, what would it be?
Here's what it was when the album came out, because they put us in Southern rock. I was like, on DMT, that was before I knew what DMT was, but
Yeah. It is. I mean, it's not unrelated to Southern rock, but
it's totally. But it's like what Greg Allman. I remember Greg Allman doing an interview, and they were like, "So we heard you don't like the term Southern rock. What's up?" And he goes, "Well, first of all, it's redundant." And I was like, "There you go. What do you mean?"
Wow. Very good point.
It's rock and roll, which came out of where? He just, I don't know. But
that's like American
that's why I think
jazz.
it's just like American.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really we're all gumbo. It's all gumbo in some kind of way. Everything's mashed up together.
It was cool, and I think it still happens, but it's cool when the festival is programmed not just a roll call of the top touring jam bands. But there'd be weird stuff on the bill where you're like, oh, I saw a band from Africa, or I saw, whatever. Things that, so because that enriches the music,
Totally. Yeah.
So it's not self-cannibalizing all the time. That's what I'm saying,
Yeah. And also the collaborations and like the people you leave a festival, you never heard of them before. And you're like, oh, wow, they sat in with Panic. And here's this amazing, they love them so much that they're like, we need to showcase these, influences of ours to the world and come up and sing.
Which is what those guys were doing. I mean, the Allman Brothers and the Grateful Dead, I mean, that's what they were doing. They were mixing all this stuff, gospel and country and bluegrass and jazz and funk and,
My cousin was a Deadhead in college, and he heard Organ Grinder Swing by Jimmy Smith at Set Break, and then became a complete jazz organ fanatic, and then jazz in general, bought all these records. It's crazy how those things can turn people on. I know so many people that heard about the Neville Brothers from the Dead, So.
Absolutely. And I think it's really cool. I saw an interview. It was like right after I got the Dead Company gig. I saw an interview with Bramford after he had been playing with the Grateful Dead. And he was still really young.
I love that interview.
In this interview, you know. And he's like, man, these people come out to your gigs like, Dark Star, dude. You know, he's like, but they show up, they support, they buy the records, they know what we're doing. My favorite is Tom Guarna, who's like a jazz guy, New York jazz guitarist that I've kind of brought into the fold. He was doing a jazz gig in New Haven, and these Deadheads brought him a big Sally's pizza, which is his favorite pizza on earth, to the gig. He was like, yo, man, these Grateful Dead fans are the best.
They dosed the crust, but it was still a good pizza.
And they dug the gig. I mean, they're listeners.
Sure.
You know, I think it was so cute, man. I was loving it.
And people are generally, I like that scene because people are generally coming to have a good time. They're not coming to like sit there and bad vibe you, you know.
And they're coming to listen.
Yeah, have a good time with their friends.
They want something good to happen, you know, in a way where, you know, some jazz crowds are kind of going to play jury duty and see if you're going to cut it.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Christian McBride talked about that. He was like, you know, come on, man.
Yeah.
Where's the real, where's the mud? Where's the butt? Where's the earth in this thing? You know, like, come on.
Instead of like, well, they missed that change, you know, whatever. It's like,
that's when we stick really Sun Ra on them, stick Cecil Taylor on them, get them out of the room so we can get back to the real stuff. So let me ask you this. Could your like 18, 19, 20-year-old self see you with Roger Waters now? Like how could you see?
I mean, it's amazing in a way. Yes, totally. Because I thought, at that age, I had no fear. I was like, of course I'm going to be a rock star. Like,
see, I had none of that.
That's where I was headed. And then as the world beat me down, I thought like, so if you would ask me 2 years ago, I'd be like, no way, that's never going to happen.
2 years ago. Yeah.
But,
that's funny. Mine is like, I just hoped I didn't have to have a real job. Like if I got away with not having a real job and getting in traffic, I would be like, I made it. Yeah. So like all this, I'm like, what? It's like an acid trip.
I still feel like I'm playing hooky all the time. Like at some point they're gonna find out. Like you haven't been showing up to your job, you know? Yeah.
The gig's gonna be up.
Yeah.
But I think that's beautiful because that's the feeling that we didn't want to give up. So it's great you still have it because a lot of us don't. I mean, I do, but I mean. You know, a lot of people, that jaded thing happens, and it's sad. It's like, it's sad.
Yeah, that Monday morning when everyone's going to work and you're not, and it's like, did it, made it.
I'm still psyched. Yeah, I'm still like, I don't have to set an alarm. It's like, it's amazing. But I've also had a lot of ups and downs in I've never had like a sort of, I've always had to work for it and like find the next thing. And I you know, I wish it was a little more comfortable and reliable, but I like that too. Like I like kind of hunting for it, and I like to stay a little bit hungry. So
it keeps your edge. You know, I look at people making heavy transitions later in life. You know, and they're not used to it, and that threat, like you know, we're one death away from. Me not having a gig anymore, you know, like it just, I could die, you know. So I mean, nobody really has any security. I mean, that's my favorite quote: "A false sense of security is the only kind there really is." But it's easier when you when you live like that daily, because for other people that put all their eggs in the security basket and then the basket gets set on fire, it's like, whoa, it's harder.
It's devastating. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when you look at the calendar, the empty blocks in the calendar are the ones that look the biggest. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like when you're looking through it, it's like, oh, geez, got to fill those.
Yeah. And I consider myself a side man in a way where I've done a lot of different kinds of music. So I feel like I'm not committed to one gig. It's really crazy people who like have been in a band their whole life, like one band, and that's their skill set is that music. Not to say that that's in a way that music gets deeper, because that's your whole thing. You're the only person that can do that. It's just that what do you do once the gig goes away, if the band breaks up or something? It's hard to move on, because that's really your identity.
Yeah.
I've walked through that with the Allman Brothers and Dead. It's a trip, man. I mean, I remember when we were doing Vita Blue, and Paige tells me, he goes, this is the second band I've ever been in.
Right, wow.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
It's like, boy,
amazing.
did you pick a crazy one, me and Russell Batiste. Oh, no. Sorry.
Incredible band.
Into the fire, yep.
It's kind of that way with Mayer, really.
Yeah.
And is Carl still playing with the Stones now, too?
Yep.
That's amazing. So you guys are going to be, is there going to be a Gray Boy tour after you guys are off your tours? So you're going to be coming from Roger Waters, and he's going to be coming from the Stones, and you got pretty cool, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really great. So we'll do some touring next year on this thing, and we all have talked about it, and we're like, that's the band we want to be in when we're old. This
nice.
Is and we'll all do other things, but we'll always come back together. It's gotten really.
That's sweet.
There's a time when we were in the van where we kind of wanted to kill each other, but at this point, as we get older, we appreciate each other more. Everybody hangs more. It just feels like your family or something. We grew up together in a way. So, so we're like, that's our retirement.
Not a bad retirement
hobby. Like, we're gonna hang out because it just feels the best, and I love playing with those people.
I love that it just happened like so randomly. One of the big themes of my life always is how fate works with chemistry. To me, it feels like it was planned. It doesn't feel random, but either way, it sure is great. Like, if that DJ Gray Boy hadn't, like, you found your boys that you want to get old with, like, we'll be at the nursing home
right,
doing our funk jam. I mean? That's special, man. That's cool.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for that.
Thank you for joining us today. This has been a blast.
Yeah, I had a great time.
Where can everybody find all things you? Can you tell our listeners?
So the Gray Boy album, buy it from us.
Hell yeah, man! Totally.
There's only so many, and we're the whole store. So grayboyallstars.com, you can order the vinyl. Then it's streaming everywhere. I don't mind if you listen to it for free, but you can throw us some money if you want, But I feel like I want it to be available to everybody. But the vinyl is real sweet, so that. And then my stuff is Royal Potato Family or RobertWalter.com or wherever else. But everything's around, so check it out.
Nice, dude.
I have a good time out on tour there, man.
Yeah,
thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening, everybody.